I've always been close to all three of my siblings. My oldest brother, Collin, pretty much raised us due to serious neglect and parentification. I realize what a sacrifice that is, and that he should not have been doing all he did. We are all no contact with our mother. Collin is engaged to Darcy. Our mother briefly dated Darcy's dad, very briefly. We were never anything close to step-siblings, and Collin was living at college at the time. Darcy was the most popular girl at school, and she could be really mean. I know her family was crazy toxic and she was lashing out, but still, no excuses to bully. Darcy didn't like that her dad was dating a woman with kids, and Darcy and I got into a verbal argument once because we were home alone at her dad's house, and she announced my family is trashy, social climbers, and my mom is a whore. We got into it and said some mean stuff. Apparently, I hurt Darcy's feelings, so her and her friends set up a prank at school and had a popular boy I like ask me to prom, and a few days before told me it was a joke. Collin was pissed, but a few hours away at college. My other brother did try to avenge me, which led to our parents breaking up, but Darcy's dad already had his next girlfriend lined up, so that was inevitable. Collin and Darcy reconnected years later and have been together for 3 years, and the wedding is in May. I know it might sound petty, but I was a shy, insecure girl, and what she did gutted me. Darcy has apologized. Collin thinks I should forgive her because she was a kid, and she was acting how her dysfunctional parents taught her to act, and has since grown up. I told him I was sorry, but I just couldn't go. To be honest, it brings up a lot of my insecurities, and I don't want to see her getting this huge princessy wedding with everyone fawning over her. My sister thinks I should let it go. My other brother loves Darcy and treats her like a sister. Darcy recently sent me a text about she's sorry, but I'm being awful to Collin, and how he had no childhood because he was trying to protect me from our insane mother, and how he shouldn't have been walking to the store at 12 to make sure I could eat. And after all of that, I owe him this. I've yet to reply, and I keep going back and forth about if I'm being an a-hole or not. Now the top comments. I am really torn on this. As someone who was severely bullied as a kid and teen, I don't get holding grudges about it into adulthood, because most people simply aren't the same person as a kid and an adult. I don't want to be judged on how I was in high school, so I don't want to do the same to others. If she had really apologized and left it at that, I would say you were the a-hole here. But ouch. The fact that Darcy is sending you texts, guilt-tripping you about stuff that wasn't even your fault when you were a kid makes me think she probably hasn't really changed because she is still bullying you. I doubt your brother knows she's saying that stuff to you, because most people wouldn't be okay with having their childhood drama weaponized against someone they care about. In the end, I'm going to say not the a-hole, because it's reasonable for you to not want to expose yourself to a bunch of emotional triggers. But I hope you will talk to your brother one-on-one and clear the air about this. It sounds like you have a very strong bond, and it would be terrible to lose that. This one is really hard to decide either way, especially with no knowledge of how the people in this story interact beyond one Reddit post. Personally, I believe Darcy deserves a chance. Would your brother love her enough to marry her if she was still the mean, vindictive little kid she used to be? But then that text message definitely shows a little immaturity. To be fair, I can understand how she would feel the need to reach out and say something, since she knows the only reason you wouldn't attend is because of how she used to treat you. She could have worded it in a way that showcases more genuine remorse for her actions. But that's easier said than done, especially if she was very emotional when sending the text. In the end, I'd say you're not the a-hole. It's your decision, and she really hurt you. But I'd say go to the wedding with a good friend who's agreed to leave if it's too stressful. It would be so important to your brother, especially if you're honest with him about your plan. Who knows, you may find that she's really transformed into a great person. My brother, sister, and I have mostly lived with my mother's ex-friend, Aunt Osa, because my mom is an abusive alcoholic, and my dad has been in and out of prison for robbery and battery. Aunt Osa tried to help Mom by paying for rehab, etc., but Mom would leave. When I was 11, Aunt Osa disappeared. The police were outside our home. Aunt Osa is black and we are white. So even though the officers knew we were living with her, they said she is not our real auntie. They then talked amongst themselves that our dad is the man they are for, and that god-awful woman is our mother. So they sent us back there. When Aunt Osa came back, she apologized, said she was in the hospital, had surgery, and now lives in the city. We went to live with her and changed our last name to hers. My boyfriend Carl and I have lived together for 5 months. A month ago, Carl started his new job as a healthcare assistant, which he loves. I took him to dinner to celebrate and brought him gifts. Carl talked excitedly about his training. Last week, he told me I'm allergic to penicillin and had a smear test. I asked him if he read my medical notes. He grinned. I said he could have asked. He shrugged. I asked if he's allowed to do that. He nodded. When he left, I called my brother Alex, as he's a medical student. He said Carl is wrong as I'm not his patient. It's a fireable offense, and he'd better stop as Cerner tracks everything. I called Carl the next day and told him that Cerner is tracking him. Carl said I'm lying. I asked him to please not look at family/friends' notes. He said they don't live in the area of the 3 hospitals he has access to. I asked him again to promise, and he said fine. Days later, Carl sent me a text asking why I didn't tell him about Aunt Osa. I forgot about Cerner, so I texted what. Carl tells me he's at work. Later, I received loads of picture messages. They are photographs of a Word document taken from a screen. It's hard to read, but then I see Aunt Osa's name. Aunt Osa disappeared because Dad broke into her house, beat and forced her. She had to be taken to a specialist hospital and when she woke up, was told she was pregnant. She had a miscarriage and had to have surgery. She collapsed when the psychotherapist tried to walk her. The psychiatrist said she blames herself for the miscarriage. Everything terrifies her and that was her first sexual experience. Even my brother, sister, and I are mentioned because she doesn't know if we're safe. I have ruined her life. I am devastated. I had no idea about Dad. I call Carl and scream. He just keeps shouting how was he to know that I didn't know. I said I'm reporting him. He starts getting scared and said it was just Aunt Osa's notes he read. I hang up and file a complaint. I want to apologize to Aunt Osa. Carl sent texts asking me to not say anything and that he loves his job. Am I the a-hole? Now the top comments. Not the a-hole. You would have been an a-hole if you hadn't reported Carl. His conduct is entirely unacceptable, and he evidently does not need to be handling sensitive medical information. To be honest, your relationship with him needs to end. He shows so much disregard for healthy boundaries and common human decency. You don't need a man like that in your life. You should go see a therapist to work through your feelings on this and figure whether it may be appropriate to tell your Aunt Osa what you've learned. Talking about it may re-traumatize her, but at the same time, it is a huge thing that this info is now floating around thanks to Carl, and she may want to know of it. I am not sure what the best course of action is on that. Consult a professional. Lastly, you did not ruin your Aunt Osa's life. You are not responsible for what your father did. He sounds like a horrible man who did unforgivable things. But you could not control that at all. You were a child. Only your father is responsible for what happened. He made a series of atrocious, inhumane decisions that you had no say or sway over. His decisions were not those of a decent, well-adjusted person, and there is nothing you could have done that would have changed him or what happened. It doesn't seem like your Aunt Osa holds what happens against you in the slightest. She raised you with love and even asked you and your siblings to take on her surname. I get the impression that you didn't ruin her life at all. You added much love to it, and that she understands that what your father did was entirely on him and was not your fault. You are understandably going through a lot right now and having to process a lot of information and emotions. That's normal and healthy. Take your time to work through this. I hope that you, your siblings, and your Aunt Osa can find the peace and happiness you all deserve. I used to have a German Shepherd named Willie, but had to put him up for adoption because my future stepson is allergic to dogs. So Willie had to be out of the house before my fiancée and her son moved in with me. Not gonna lie, I did feel like I'd given up on Willie. I've had him since he was small, but I did thorough digging to find him the perfect home and the perfect family. I had met up with the family and they embraced him right away. They seemed nice and all and agreed to keep in contact so I could learn about how Willie's doing. This took place in December. I got busy with the holidays, then loads and loads of work, and I was only able to call the family to check on Willie last week. Anyways, so while I was with them on the phone, I heard a small girl yelling "Rudy" repeatedly. I asked who Rudy was, and they casually said it was Willie, but they gave him a new name. I was absolutely shocked. I asked if they were being serious with me, and they asked what's wrong. I absolutely lost it on them, telling them that the dog already has a name that was given to him by his owner, and they should respect that. Plus, all his legal papers are under the name Willie. But I was surprised when they said they took care of that legally. Like, how? I told them they had no permission for me to rename the dog point blank, period. But they argued that Willie is theirs now, and I have no say. I told them they were dead wrong and demanded that they have some respect and stop confusing him and start calling him with his real name. They refused, and we got into a huge fight on the phone and social media, where they threatened to block me. I was so mad I took the argument to their place, where they threatened to report me for harassment. I decided to take a few days to let things settle down, then I'd visit them again. But my fiancé thinks I'm overstepping and should let the family decide this stuff without harassing them, which was an expected thing to hear from her, since her stepson is the reason I had to let off my dog in the first place. She got offended, but I told her that siding with strangers mistreating my dog did not paint her in a good light, though I started thinking she might be right. Now the top comments. You're the a-hole. Good lord. Rudy is not your dog anymore. You have no say over him anymore. You lost any input into his life the moment you gave him up. If anything, you mistreated him by providing him a comfortable and stable home and then dumping him on strangers out of the blue. Imagine the stress he went through losing his mate and routine without warning and having no idea what was going on. Also, they chose a name that sounds vaguely similar to Willie, so he probably wasn't confused by the name change at all. When I rescued my dog, her name was Kelly. I have a family member named Kelly, and I personally dislike human names for pets and like more fun names. So I renamed her Kiwi. She had no issues adjusting to her new name. I can see why it might upset you, but you are going about this all wrong, which unfortunately makes you the a-hole here. They have adopted the dog, so they are right. It is theirs now. They may extend you the courtesy in some regards, but it's perfectly within their right to rename Willie if they want to. To berate them about it on social media and to even go as far as going to their place to argue over it is way over the top, and honestly, you are putting yourself in a potentially legally challenging position. I understand with stuff like it's hard not to get emotional over a close family pet. No one's going to call you out for that. But as they've said, they have adopted him now and hold the right to change his name if they so wish, no matter how much an emotional connection you have. I'm not too clear why you are under the impression they can't do this legally. My brother-in-law, Dave, 54, moved with my husband and me last year. Dave's wife divorced him at the start of the pandemic because she didn't want to be home with him. Dave has had issues for about 10 years because he had untreated autism. He goes to therapy and expects everyone to do what his therapist does. Within 6 months of staying with us, I stopped cooking altogether, and I get takeout for myself. This is because Dave never liked what I made. Dave would start saying because he cooks, now we have to do the dishes. I told him no because I'm not eating the food he cooks. Dishes have piled up to disgusting levels regularly. I work full-time and I'm working on my master's. Dave got my husband to start going to therapy with him, and now they will gang up on me in my home for not helping Dave with his issues related to autism. I spent Christmas with my parents without my husband, and my mom told me I'm always welcome to live with them. It's out of state, but I already work remotely. This week, Dave and my husband came back from therapy and gave me a list of recommendations from the therapist on how to make Dave's life easier. I threw away the paper in front of them, and I started to gather my documents and some suitcases to take on a flight. I told Dave I hope he's happy because he has now destroyed 2 marriages by being a selfish prick. My husband acted shocked that I would speak to his brother like that, and I should go to therapy with both of them. I declined and moved out. My husband's family thinks I'm a monster because I have talked to Dave, blaming him for destroying 2 marriages. I'm just fed up. Now the top comments. Not the a-hole. David doesn't understand the concept of therapy, and neither does your husband. Therapy isn't learning on how to make everyone do what you want them to do. It's learning how to deal with the world and with yourself. Either the therapist is a disaster/crook, or they're misinterpreting what he says and are feeding him weird lies about what goes on in everyday life. Autism can't be cured, but it can be treated in the sense of going to a therapist that actually has goals of improvement for the person, and not just for those around that person, and helps them understand the world better. David seems to be wanting the world to fully change for him, with no effort on his side. If your marriage is to be saved, the first thing would be to get David out of that home. Unless that changes, nothing will get fixed between you two. If you do not want to work on that marriage anymore, that's fully understandable either. Doesn't sound like your husband is ready for a true partnership if he gangs up against you. Or at least he isn't capable of putting boundaries for his brother nor prioritizing your marriage.